race is becoming.
All right, everybody. Okay, so we're going to be talking warfare, but I want to do one thing, and this sort of is a direct connection between me and my mom and David Knight and perhaps a number of other people. I want to talk 2 notes of rest in peace to start the program. And I usually don't do this. One of these people, I know people who have met this man and admire him greatly and have worked with him. The other person I have not met. First, of course, I want to mention, David Knight brought this up, as Don Jeffries mentions, journalist and peace advocate John Rappaport has died at the age of 88. He was a frequent guest on the David Knight Show. He worked hard to expose the COVID jab dangers and was a powerful proponent for the original Federalist system. And David's commentary about John is right here in the news notes. He said, I just heard John Rappaport passed on. I was texting David about that yesterday, and we were sort of chatting about John's influence on us. He says, so sorry to hear that. What a contrast his life was to Lindsey Graham, a life devoted to saving lives and helping people rather than taking lives needlessly and exploiting war for gain. John was 88. Well done, brother. Rest in peace. And I also want to mention New Zealand actor Sam Neill. Sam Neill died at the age of 78. I saw some people say that he was 76. He suffered from blood cancer for a while, but he was recently diagnosed as cancer-free. Of course, Mr. Neill likely is best known for his role in helping the Jurassic Park series rise to great heights. But for others like me, his breakout role was Sidney Riley. And I think the same thing for David Knight in Riley, Ace of Spies. And it was a remarkable performance very early on in his career. His work in that series, as I noted, was remarkable and offered viewers a window into the history of early Soviet Russia. And it really was just an amazing miniseries. It was great. He added to his acting accomplishments back in New Zealand by establishing a well-respected winery as well. So rest in peace, Sam Neill. I think a lot of people, when it comes to actors, they're just workaday people, obviously, but they enter our lives and they provide something that it's a very strange sort of thing. It's the sort of thing that we provide to each other across the counter at a bank teller thing, but they're up on a screen. They get seen by many people within a story that's very entertaining. And he was a remarkably gifted actor, and he utilized those gifts very well. All right, so we're going to go into the Lindsey Graham stuff in just a minute. But first, I want to get into the latest on what's going on with who is going to be replacing Lindsey Graham. So let me give you this one because this is just sort of ridiculous, but here it is, okay? Right here, where is it? I think I've got it here. Yeah, so Lindsey Graham's sister is going to be his replacement, evidently. Nancy Mace thought this was a great idea early today, Trump suggested that the governor of South Carolina plop Graham's sister into the Senate seat, and Nancy Mace loved the idea. Gen X girl, who refers to 1984 or 1994 in her X feed or whatever, must be her birth date, says, so we're passing seats in the Senate to family members. Trump says, I recommend to Governor Henry McMaster, Lindsey Graham's wonderful sister, Darlene, to serve as interim senator from the great state of North Carolina. This would be a fabulous tribute to Lindsey, who loved her dearly. Wouldn't that be a fabulous tribute to just, hand a Senate seat to somebody? And yes, that's right, everyone. You got it. Henry McMaster has appointed Lindsey Graham's sister, Darlene Graham Nordone, to serve out his final Senate term. So there you go. All right. Isn't that exciting? That's exciting, isn't it? All right. Now, let's talk about Lindsey before we go into the war stuff. We'll do that first. Okay. So I think there are some important things to remember. Many of these things we have consistently tried to discuss here on the program, but some of it now that Lindsey Graham has passed away, regardless of speculation about how he died and how the reporting was handled on it and where he was before this and what that might have done as far as whether or not there was some sort of ill influence in his passing. I'm not going to speculate on any of that stuff. As far as I know, it was natural causes and he just dropped dead because he had a bad heart. But I will mention this. Lindsey Graham will not rest, one suspects. He never asked forgiveness and acts as a lesson to others now, I think. Perhaps all of us who might reflect on our own, hopefully, much less destructive errors and sins. And that's really where I come from on this. I want to factually discuss where Lindsey Graham kept pushing for war and his actions have caused such destruction. And obviously, he was responsible for millions of people dying and millions of people suffering all around the world for many, many years. But now that he is dead, there's a sort of act of reflection that says, okay, it's not just does one speak ill of the dead? Well, if one speaks factually about him, it's going to be ill. What can you say? And Max Blumenthal really brought that up. He went through factually about the fact that he is responsible for millions of people dying. He was a warmonger. He supported genocide. But I want to also mention that in a way, I don't know if you get the same feeling as I do on this, but in a way, it makes me consider, as I look at him, I humbly look at myself and I say, to no extent and no degree have I engaged in the criminal evils that he has perpetrated and supported throughout his life. But it does make me check and say, okay, I think the Lord would want me to look inward to say, remember, you've made mistakes and you need to atone for your own sins. So if this can act in any way as a positive to get other people to ask God for forgiveness for their own sins, to face up to some of the things that in their lives they haven't done, maybe they haven't embraced Christ and not looked at the reality of Jesus as God and the Son of God and the human connection for us here on earth. Maybe that's a way that one can look at this. And I just said his towering level of evil and his death even can be used by God as signals to all of us who might want to take from his death the opportunity to avoid engaging in acts of anger or angry criticism of Graham and use that time to level-headedly criticize Graham, even as we consider rectifying our own mistakes, asking forgiveness from God, and trying to teach others about avoiding the allure of power that Graham loved so much, that ring of power. Smoov's got this. War theme and Lindsey Graham, death theme, gay bar by Electric Six. That's a very, very good idea. Going to take you to a gay bar. So we can see where he last was, of course. This commentator on X says, life is strange. 1 minute you're smiling, holding a weapon of death and destruction that tears human bodies apart. The next day, you're lying on a slab in a temperature-controlled room while half the world dances in celebration. Yep, and as I noted, we yesterday posted this information from RT on Graham's pernicious influence in Ukraine. So I want to go to the RT piece on this, and we quoted from this, and I think some of this quotation is really worthwhile. RT wrote, Republican U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina has died at the age of 71. Graham passed away on Saturday evening from a brief and sudden illness. Senator Graham's family appreciates prayers at this time. They said emergency services responded to a call for cardiac arrest at Graham's Capitol Hill residence on Saturday night. Now, Graham's death comes a day after his return from Kiev, from that very image you saw there, where he met with Zelensky Friday, the so-called lawmaker, the statute writer, who was a strong advocate for U.S. military assistance to Ukraine and a harsh critic of Russia, has visited the Ukrainian capital at least 10 times in recent years. U.S. President Trump reacted to the death of his ally, saying that Graham, quote, will be greatly missed. In a post on his Truth Social platform, Trump described the senator as one of the greatest people and senators I've ever known. He was always working and was a true American patriot. Well, obviously, we can tell that Donald Trump is not a good judge of character. He is a bad character himself, and he's himself a war criminal, and clearly has engaged in extrajudicial murders hundreds of times and has supported genocide like Lindsey Graham. Now, the key portion I want to read here is this. Graham famously called for the assassination of Russian President Vladimir Putin after the escalation of the Ukraine conflict in February 2022. During an appearance on Fox News, the senator cited historic examples of plots to kill famous political leaders, including Julius Caesar and Adolf Hitler. Is there a Brutus in Russia? Is there a more successful Colonel Stauffenberg in the Russian military? The only way this ends, my friend, is for somebody in Russia to take this guy out, Graham said. Yeah, he certainly had no fear of saying dumb and incredibly inflammatory things on camera, did he? No, because, of course, he was an egomaniac and thought that the world was his oyster and he could do anything he wanted. During his trip to Kiev the following year, the senator described the U.S. military aid being sent to Ukraine as the best money we've ever spent because the Russians are dying. Graham has repeatedly called for more economic pressure on Moscow, threatening it with what he called bone-crushing sanctions in recent months because he can just play with the economy. He can just do what he wants, even though there's nothing in the Constitution that allows it. He has been actively promoting a bill that would impose 500% tariffs on all countries that purchase oil of Russian origin. Speaking about Graham last year, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that the lawmaker was part of, quote, the group of the most inveterate Russophobes in the West. The senator has been on Russia's list of extremists and terrorists since the 2023 year. So over at Liberty Conspiracies News Notes, I do have this. We want to remember Afshin Ratansi says, if you want to know why many are saying good riddance instead of RIP after Lindsey Graham passed away, here he is advocating for Israel to use, you got it, nuclear weapons in Gaza. Yeah, of course. Remember this classic?
We decided to end the war by bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki with nuclear weapons. That was the right decision. Give Israel the bombs they need to end the war they can't afford to lose and work with them to minimize casualties. So, can I say this? Why is it?
So, of course, yes. Why is it okay for America to not to drop 2 nuclear bombs?
Okay for America to drop 2 nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end their existential threat war. Why was it okay?
No, it wasn't okay, actually. It wasn't okay. Thousands of innocent people died. It wasn't necessary, even under the tactical landscape that existed at the time. And, of course, it was all done through expropriation of people's tax money, which means none of it was okay from the outset, Mr. Graham. Your entire salary wasn't okay. Your entire existence in politics, anybody's existence in politics is run off of somebody else's money. None of it's okay. There are just different degrees to which one can find offense. And dropping bombs on innocent people and burning them alive so their shadows are imprinted on concrete walls is pretty offensive. So it wasn't okay. And it's not okay to engage in genocide or to support it, Mr. Graham. Remember that? And of course, even though the United States helped put together the United Nations and push for the Geneva Accords and push for the war crimes tribunals of the Nazis, well, the United States and Israel skirt and get around the ICC and the ICJ. Ashwin Ratansi says, if you want to know why many are saying good riddance, down here, this one. Yeah, the Rome Statute. He says, of course, the Rome Statute doesn't apply to Israel or the USA or France or Germany or Great Britain because it wasn't conceived to come after us. The only thing Graham can be credited with is taking the mask off the rules-based order to reveal the hypocrisy it is based on. Rules for the West, but not for the rules for the rest, but not for the West. So he was in Jerusalem in 2024. And of course, he says, it doesn't apply to you. It doesn't apply to you, Israel. It doesn't apply to us. So what does that tell you? That tells you he knows they're slaughtering innocent people. But he's saying there's no workable legal framework that actually can hold you to account, he's claiming.
statute doesn't apply to Israel or the United States or France or Germany or Great Britain because it wasn't conceived to come after us. Statute doesn't apply to Israel or the United States or France or Germany or Great Britain because it wasn't conceived to come after us.
Amazing. Amazing. I guess he's going to be answering to a higher authority, not man's statutes. Of course, don't forget his time hanging with the Nazis. Dave DeCamp brought this up. We have the video clips in our library. Let's go to the classic hits of This Is Your Time. This is your time to take on the baddies, as he would say. This is your time to go after you know who. As Dave DeCamp and others remember, McCain and Graham spoke to Ukrainian Marines on the front lines of the Donbass War in December of 2016. These would be Ukrainian Marines who were slaughtering ethnically Russian people. These would be people that we can remember from John McCain, Amy Klobuchar, and others appearing with members of the Azov Battalion. Remember that? This is one of the photographs we've shown very often. And John McCain appeared on stage along with Chris Murphy and others next to Ole Tyanibok a few weeks later after the overthrow. When you got it, Victoria Nuland had handed out her cookies, Ole Tyanibok being the head of the Svoboda Party. That's S-V-O-D-O-B-A. You can look it up there, News Guard. That's the Nazi party that they utilized to back Yatsenyuk in early 2014. And they mentioned him in the phone call between Victoria Nuland and Jeffrey Pyatt to form the coalition government to back Yatsenyuk. Let's go back to those heady days of late 2017 when they met with people like President Petro Poroshenko and others to praise the soldiers who were going to be killing the ethnically Russian people.
Дуже дякую вам за ту величезну і надзвичайно важливу службу, яку ви тут. Це наші американські друзі і партнери, сенатори Сполучених Штатів Америки. Вони на власні очі можуть переконатися, що означає українська морська піхота, яка сьогодні мир та спокій українських громадян. І сьогодні
There's Amy Klobuchar. There's John McCain. I don't know who that woman is. Anybody who had her for the Senate or something like that, let me know. You just let me know which people you think are just your favorites here in this baseball card array of deceitful people.
Your homeland.
Я захоплююсь тим, що ви боретеся за свою батьківщину.
Your fight is our fight.
Ваша боротьба – це наша боротьба.
2017 will be the year of offense.
Рік 2016 рік буде ріком нападу.
All of us will go back to Washington and we will push the case against Russia.
Ми всі повернемося до Вашингтону і ми будемо відстоювати санкції проти Росії.
Enough of a Russian aggression.
Досить вже російської агресії.
It is time for them to pay a heavier price.
So you remember all that Russian aggression? Remember that Russian aggression? That would have been the Russian aggression that didn't exist. The Russian aggression as the Russians sat there and tried to abide by agreements that James Baker had given to them back in the 90s to say, if you allow East and West Germany to reunify, if you allow Ukraine to be on its own, we promise NATO won't expand into the Iron Curtain countries. Remember that Russian aggression as NATO expanded into the Iron Curtain countries? Remember that Russian aggression as Barack Obama and Dick Lugar went in 2005, 2006 and dropped millions and hundreds of millions of dollars to start biolabs in Estonia and Latvia and Georgia and Ukraine. And all of a sudden, just before she left office, Tulsi Gabbard discovered that this was real. Except we've been talking about it for years. RT has documentaries on it, and we've shown segments of that for years on this program. I've been writing about it for MRC TV. That's a message to you, News Guard. Thanks for coming after me when I was writing about this stuff in 2016. It's really sad to think that these people not only can get away with this stuff for so long that they take so many lives, but the really twisted thing is that these people go through this vetting so-called process of voting, which really is just getting people in their states and getting corporate backers and international backers and banking backers to give them money to get elected so that they can carry on destruction for the special interests like the military-industrial complex. And don't forget, John McCain and I shook hands in 1999 after he already bald-facedly lied to me in front of a packed house in my town, saying that a piece of legislation that he had proposed that would have silenced people who would have been critical of him in political campaigns, he said that the legislation had changed, which was utterly bogus. And then as he came around and shook my hand, I said, hey, even if one thinks the War Powers Act is constitutional, which it isn't, Bill Clinton has been destructive in Serbia much longer than that allows him. Oh, yes, we're very concerned about that. What are you going to do about it? Nothing. Because they love war. They love the military-industrial complex. So I have a feeling that Lindsey Graham has joined John McCain. And I don't know how to assess any of that afterlife stuff. But I don't think he asked for forgiveness. Now, as we know, Graham stood with the genocide machine first, always, as he told us. And this is the final bit on Graham that I want to discuss tonight and get your thoughts on this. We'll put these up on the screen. Get ready over at Rumble. Let me know your thoughts. Here he is, of course, first, last, and always for Israel.
Forget it. I'm not with you. I'm with Israel. I will be with Israel to our dying day. They're the best ally we could hope for. So we have a commander-in-chief in President Trump. How
are they the best ally that we could hope for? How is that? How are we? Are they your ally? Did they help you get your pizza this weekend? They come over and knock on your door. Hey, how you doing? I was wondering, I heard you were sick. They help you change your tire. They say, hey, I know you're going to be going away. I'll take care of the dog for you. How are they your ally? No, they're parasitic. And we're going to be referring to this a little bit more later in the program. Of course, Section 219 of the NDAA integration of Israeli and U.S. arms-making projects, as well as Senate Intel Authorization Act 622, are brainchildren of Netanyahu and people like Mr. Graham, and Netanyahu admits it. So let's head on over here as a group of Senate Democrats. Again, Democrats. And look who's here. Senator Van Hollen, again, doing the right thing. Whether or not it's for show, we'll see. But this man went to CCOT to try to visit Kilmar Abrigo Garcia. The right tried to mock him. He said, hey, have you heard of due process? Do you just wipe it away like the tears you might feel about your pal, Lindsey Graham? Group of U.S. Senate Democrats urges a block on defense spending bill over clauses deepening Israeli ties. So perhaps Thomas Massie can get some help on the Senate side. A group of U.S. lawmakers is urging fellow Democrats to block military spending legislation until the Senate debates proposals to deepen ties with Israel, highlighting growing unease within the party over support for the country and Prime Minister Netanyahu's government. In a letter seen by Reuters and led by Democrat Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, they urged senators to oppose advancing the National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, which funds the U.S. Defense Department, until lawmakers, statute writers, can debate measures that would strengthen U.S.-Israel military and intelligence cooperation. Why are they doing that? Because they can define what national security is, not you. This is for your, it's the game of government. It's for your security. We'll define it. Now you pay us. Thanks. Have a nice day. Now, whether or not this passes, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? But people are pushing very hard to try to stop this. When I was writing about the Portman-Murphy Countering Foreign Propaganda Act that was inside the 2016 NDAA, I think I was the only one nationally who was trying to tell people this was a really bad idea. And it passed. It was part of the NDAA. And from that point on, for the next 2 years, all sorts of organizations started to come after me and MRC TV and people like Matt Taibbi and others. And then we found out that NewsGuard and organizations like a very left-wing group at the University of Texas in Austin and others got your tax money to stifle you when you were talking about things like COVID, like the jabs, like the masks, like Anthony Fauci, like Ukraine and the United States involvement in the overthrow there. All of it. I was silenced. They came after me. They made me do hour upon hour upon hour of extra work. And they were getting paid because of the Portman-Murphy Countering Foreign Propaganda Bill in that year's NDAA 2016. Now we've got another one. They always put it into the NDAA. Anybody who watches this stuff, when you see the NDAA, you got to look into it. Because they always are sliding some pernicious, poison, spider bite in there. Let's check out what you've got to say, everybody. Give me your comments on Lindsey Graham, and let me know if you think that this NDAA thing can be stopped. And also on the Senate side, if you think Tom Cotton's proposal for the 622, the Senate Intelligence Authorization Act, is going to go through. Because again, regardless of whether or not people think that it's dangerous for the United States to be sharing secrets with Israel, they already do that. The point is establishing the corporate connections and then planting them in the states so that the state politicians won't want that spigot of corporate money stopped because jobs depend on it. Heading over to Rumble. Let's see. We've got CJ Prumble. Rumble at Prumble. I like it. Let's rumble with the Prumble. Little Jethro Tull for you there, everybody. Thank you very much, Russians. Yes, thanks. Thanks to these douche nozzles. The fairy grandmother. Let's see. Real Jason Barker. Jason is in the house from Knights of the Storm. That he says, Lady Lindsay went to Israel bi-weekly. He should be buried there. Yeah, I wonder if they'll spread some of his ashes in Gaza. Nobody could tell the difference, could they? Yes. Let me see. MOE says, I'm just watching the script play out. Really bad writing these days. Drones are us. Yes. I was thinking, I was joking inside David's chat today. You know that song from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Silver and Gold, where they say silver and gold. I was thinking of missiles and drones, missiles and drones. Everyone's talking of missiles and drones. How many people can die just for the money that rains from the sky? Missiles and drones mean so much more when Graham sees missiles and drone decorations on every Christmas tree. There you go. Thank you very much. I'll be here all week. Make sure you tip your waiters. Yes, indeed. Bring the rain guard. Yes, the fairy grandmother. That's pretty good. Yeah, man. I tell you. Somebody mentioned it was George Galloway, and it's one of those opportunities where I was listening. I was getting in the shower, getting cleaned up after taking care of the cats yesterday, and it could take a lot of work. But it was a hot day yesterday, and I was listening to George Galloway, and it was one of those moments where you're thinking as he's saying something, and you're sort of like, as you speak, he says something, and sure enough, what he says is exactly what you're thinking. I got to do one thing real quick here, everybody. Let me just do this real quick for you. I forgot to plug in the computer here. Kind of an important thing to do. This is my side computer that I got to plug it in. Plug it in, plug it in. Okay, there we go. All right. So George Galloway was talking about how, Lindsey Graham had died and, he probably had a heart ailment. And then, of course, the next thing in your mind is, I didn't know he had a heart. And that's where George went. And I think most of us are thinking about that. And it is weird because it's easy to take pot shots at a person like that now that he's dead. And then you say to yourself, is it appropriate to do that? He's not here to defend himself. It's like, no, for a guy like Lindsey Graham, I think, an occasional pot shot with the knowledge that there's a certain limit and you want to really focus on the terrible things that he did, I think that that's sufficient. By looking at the things that he did, it definitely leaves room for some pot shots. That's for sure. All right. So let's get over into, we've got this. We've got this from Smooth. He says, Lindsey Graham Proverbs, when it goeth well with the righteous, the city rejoiceth. And we've got, and when the wicked perish, there is shouting. Shout, shout. Well, thank goodness his sister is going to be taking his seat. And yes, I know that leaves a lot of puns open. People were wondering who was going to fill his seat. Okay. All right. Let me get to it. Let's go through what happened in Iran. I'm not going to play Young Fast Iranians. Here is a quick update. Now, I wrote up the update because there's been so much craziness going on, but the latest is literally just happening. Okay, so I want to give you a quick recap and then we'll get to the latest. All right, so here we go. In the early hours around July 12th, the United States again breached Clause 5 of the June Memorandum of Understanding, the MOU, by pushing or facilitating unauthorized commercial passage through the Strait of Hormuz along the southern corridor near Oman's coast. Now, as a person who believes in freedom, I don't believe that any government should be blocking and saying you're authorized or you're unauthorized when it comes to travel, okay? I'm just going based on what they tell everybody are the international rules for waters and the agreements that the United States and Iran came up with. And then Donald Trump blames Iran and says they keep breaking things. Okay, bull in the China shop. So, of course, this violated Iran's sovereign rights as a coastal state and the Memorandum of Understanding framework for Iran to manage safe passage arrangements, dialogue with Oman, and respect for territorial waters and approved routes. So here you go. Here it is from Al Jazeera. What does Article 5 mean? Iran and the U.S. trade attacks over navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. Well, everybody, it got pretty crazy. Why? Because Saudi Arabia got involved. I'm waiting for the computer to respond. Thank you, computer. Saudi Arabia got involved. So we're going to go right over to this information. This is coming to us from RT.
Aden blames the militant group for provoking these strikes. The U.S. launches fresh attacks on Iran and are met with a fiery response from Tehran, which lashes out at multiple American bases across the region. And the Russian president vows a strong response to Ukrainian attacks on Russian territory, adding that retaliation will be several times more powerful than Kiev's assaults. Well, this is RT International reaching you live from our news center in Moscow. I am Mike Okwacha with the updates. Now we start with the breaking news. We're following right now. The Houthis in Yemen say that Saudi Arabia has attacked the country's international airport located in Sana'a. Now, this video released by Yemeni TV shows the exact moment Saudi forces struck Sana'a's airport. Houthis have vowed to respond, saying this assault has put an end to any attempt at de-escalation in the region. And that's as the official government in Aden accuses the militant group of provoking these strikes. RT's correspondent reports from the ground in Yemen.
According to statements made by the military spokesperson in Sana'a, Brigadier General Yahya Saree, the international airport in Sana'a was subjected to several airstrikes. He reported that they were carried out by Saudi fighter jets in order to prevent the landing of an Iranian aircraft carrying a Yemeni delegation participating in the funeral of an Iranian leader. As a result of these attacks, the aircraft was unable to land at the airport. A similar situation occurred several days ago when this same plane took off. There were also attempts to prevent its landing and the delegation's departure to Tehran, but the aircraft nevertheless managed to take off and reach Tehran. Today it returned from there, but the Yemeni government in Aden stated that the return of the Iranian aircraft constitutes a violation of Yemen's air sovereignty and emphasized that they would oppose it, claiming that it was they who struck the airport's runway. However, the Ansar Allah movement confirmed that this was an attack by Saudi Arabia. The airport became a target of the attack, marking the end of a period of de-escalation that had lasted several years between Sana'a, Saudi Arabia, and the Aden government. For approximately 5 years, aircraft were unable to land at Sana'a International Airport, so one of them headed to Hodeidah in western Yemen, where, despite the airport having been out of operation for a long time, it was able to successfully land. Now Sana'a claims that a new phase of the conflict is beginning. It has stated that it was Saudi Arabia that started this war and must bear the consequences, emphasizing that the shelling of Sana'a International Airport will not go unanswered.
All right, so we've got provocation after provocation. Why in the world did the Saudis do that? That's just crazy. Let me tell you what the Saudis and the people in the UAE are starting to do. If we go back over to the news notes, I want to show you something that I think you might find valuable. So this is a quick recap again. Oops, sorry about that. I've got to do one thing here. This is a quick recap again of what is on the ground for the grounds of the Middle East. And so if we go to the war update on Iran, let me give you this. Okay, so again, we've got the United States trying to provoke Iran by trying to lead ships past Omani waters. Again, I don't know how the United States and Iran can make an arrangement that has anything to do with Oman, whatever. I have no idea. But the United States had the agreement, and the United States literally had its Navy try to escort these ships. Iran responded defensively to this provocative breach and noncompliance. Revolutionary Guard forces issued warnings to vessels ignoring designated routes and fired a warning shot that struck the Cyprus flag container ship, causing significant engine room damage and fire. The crew abandoned ship. One Indian crew member is reported missing still. Iran declared the strait closed to unauthorized traffic until U.S. interference ends. Now, Donald Trump then claimed that the strait was open. The strait is open. Why? Because the United States somehow has magical control over it. Even though Donald Trump had to beg the Iranians to come up with an arrangement so that they could open up the strait for the MOU. He never abided by the MOU. They got it open for a little while. And of course, Donald Trump keeps doing these provocations now. So we're back to square one, where the oil situation is being strangled. And of course, now we've got the Yemenis and the Saudis in conflict with each other, which could close up the Red Sea. Just ridiculous. So the stated goal for Donald Trump right now is degrading Iran's capacity to protect the strait. The United States CENTCOM conducted airstrikes using precision munitions, as they claim, the kinds that, kill 170 kids. They struck approximately 140 Iranian military targets, plus they used drone boats to get at some of their port targets. They got missile and drone storage sites, they said, of Iran. They got ammunition dumps and coastal radar installations. They also went after places in Bandar Abbas, Sirik, Jas, and Keshem Island. Now, the Iranians responded by attacking nation states that have American bases and have been allowing them to use them again. So we've got Kuwait, Bahrain, and we saw what happened with the UAE. We saw what happened with Saudi Arabia and Yemen. And now Donald Trump has announced this. This is the latest information from Trump with his giant Sharpie signature, the Hormuz letter. This came out at 4:35. Trump has formally restarted the war. Just, because this is the United States. Didn't they just, celebrate something that gets everybody feeling very patriotic, that Declaration of Independence that led to the Articles of Confederation, which were then usurped by a centralizer named Alexander Hamilton. And then, of course, the horses were off to the races. So here we are. This is wonderful. What a charming thing. Isn't it great? Happy 250. So there you go. Yeah, Trump has restarted the war. See, it's a new name. So Trump thinks he's going to get around the War Powers Act, which itself is a watering down of what actually is required for a president to become the commander-in-chief of the military, which is not supposed to be a standing military. The Congress declares war. They call up the militia. The militia is then under the command of the commander-in-chief of the militia, not a standing army. He's only the commander-in-chief when there's a declared war. Otherwise, he's the chief executive, supposedly executing constitutional statutes. And if he finds that they're passing statutes that in his eyes aren't constitutional, he's not supposed to execute those. He's not supposed to enforce them. And if Congress thinks that that rises to a level where they find it too offensive and he's not following what they think is constitutional, then they can impeach him and try him in the Senate. These are like, this is like playing simple checkers with kids. It's very basic stuff, right? I mean, you probably got this in 9th grade. What's so tough about it? What's so tough about asking for a declaration of war? Even that skeezy character FDR wanted a declaration of war. Trump said minutes ago, that's at 4:35, that the U.S. will hit Iran hard tonight and tomorrow, adding the MOU was only a test for Iran. There you go. Isn't that wonderful? That's great. So, not to sound too sarcastic, bleak, and intense, but obviously the mindset of Lindsey Graham hasn't changed there. They're doing what Israel wants, and your bottom line and the oil that you might want for your home heating or anything like that is going to become harder to get. Perhaps people think that Donald Trump is playing a variation of that Rand document from 2019 that suggested, hey, get Europe to engage Russia in a protracted proxy war via Ukraine, and they will have very tough times keeping their GDP going, which will destroy their monetary units in their own countries and the euro, and will allow the United States U.S. Federal Reserve note to last a little longer, which, of course, is probably not the greatest idea, right? Because it's a world economy. So when you're harming them, you end up harming everybody. And you're just propping up the dollar for no reason when, of course, the dollar is fiat currency and imposed on us, and it will just be diluted even more over time. So on a relative scale, maybe the United States wouldn't have been as bad off, but on a direct one-to-one scale, your life would be worse and worse every time because, of course, they'd be devaluing the dollar to pay for the U.S. warmongering. Well, let me just give you this. Donald Trump claimed that the strait was open. Yeah, that's right. But then he reimposed the Iran blockade, he says. And get this, he's going to be imposing a 20% transit fee. Now, the fee that he's imposing, as people like Robert Barnes, as people like Daniel Davis have pointed out, is multiples higher than what the Iranians were going to be charging after the 60-day no-charge trial period going through the Strait of Hormuz. Yeah. Trump announced the U.S. will now serve as the guardian of the Hormuz Strait and says all cargo transiting the waterway will be charged a 20% fee to cover the cost of providing security. Now, just to let you know, Marco Rubio, just a little while ago, claimed that to do that was against international law. Remember that? Marco Rubio had said Iran can't charge a fee because that would be against international law, even though the Iranians and the Omanis are not signatory to that particular. The United States claimed that they couldn't do it, but now the United States is doing it, according to Donald Trump. It's amazing. Let me give you one final item, everybody. Just amazing. This is from the Iranians. And you let me know, again, I don't attach myself to any state, but I think it's pretty clear. You know, it's sort of like in the Ten Commandments, when they got the Moses played by Chuck, and they got Yul Brynner, and Yul Brynner's they're putting the weights in, and Chuck's got the brick, puts it in the scale. Here's the Iranian brick. Iran blames the U.S. for every MOU breach. Yeah, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghei confirmed that the U.S. broke the memorandum of understanding first. Quote, they had so little patience in breaking the agreement that they did not even allow the 1-month time frame foreseen in Clause 5 to pass. He made clear Iran's suspensions are responses, not violations. Quote, no one can accuse the Islamic Republic of Iran of violating the agreement. Wherever the other side violated it, we too suspended our commitments. Commitment for commitment. Iran will keep the deal exactly as long as Washington does. Okay. So obviously emotions are really high. You know, I don't need to be somehow like above any of this stuff. I try to stick to scholarship and principles and then incorporate these things, try to figure out who's being consistent, who isn't, all within the context of why do we have to be attached to any of this stuff? Why aren't you free? Why do politicians claim that they can block you from engaging in a peaceful act of commerce with somebody, a trade? That would be like saying you can't talk to somebody, you can't date a girl or a guy you want to date. You can't raise the food you want. Oh, sorry. Sorry, they already do that, don't they? Well, anyway, these are basic fundamental things. And, you know, it all comes down to that groundwork. When we're dead and gone, these are the things that are hopefully the eternal golden rule moments where we can say, okay, we're looking at all this stuff. We're looking at politicians like Lindsey Graham who spent their entire lives taking from you and shoving your money into areas where it was killing people and harming people. Politicians do that as part of their daily activity. They take your money and they steer that usable capital into areas where it normally wouldn't have gone. It feeds new cancers that you wouldn't have chosen. It doesn't allow for testing. So these are ethical and economic points as well, and they stand forever.